They called it a junk car. My son, Mark, and my daughter-in-law, Sarah, they stood in my driveway, pointing at my old Challenger, like it was a pile of garbage, an eyesore. It was a Monday afternoon. The sun was warm, but a chill ran through me, a cold, familiar dread. "Dad," Mark started, that tone he uses, the one that means he's made up his mind, and my opinion doesn't matter. "It's time to get rid of this thing." Sarah nodded, her arms crossed. "It's just taking up space, Arthur. You haven't driven it in years. It's rusted." Rusted. She called my '70 Challenger rusted. Yes, there was a patch on the fender, a tiny one. But it was a classic, a piece of history. My history. I had bought that car new, a young man full of dreams. Eleanor, my late wife, loved that car. We drove it on our honeymoon. Every Sunday, we'd cruise with the windows down, music playing. Her hair, long and dark, flying in the wind. Her laughter, so free. That car wasn't just metal. It was a time capsule. It held memories, whispers of a life lived, a love cherished. It was a part of me. "It's not just a thing," I said, my voice thin, a little shaky. I hated how old I sounded. "It's my car. I'll get around to fixing it up. I have plans." Mark sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Dad, come on. Be realistic. You're nearly 80. You can barely walk to the mailbox some days. When are you going to get around to it?" He put his hand on my shoulder. A paternal pat. I hated it. He treated me like a child, like a burden. Since Eleanor passed 3 years ago, they'd been circling. Like vultures, I sometimes thought. Not in a malicious way, perhaps, but in a way that felt like they were waiting for me to fade, to become less. First, it was the garden. "Too much work, Dad. We'll hire a service." Then my finances. "Let us help you manage your bills. It's getting complicated." Next, my diet. "You need more greens, Dad. Less red meat." Every suggestion, every help, chipped away at my independence. Every piece of advice felt like a judgment, like I wasn't capable. Not anymore. I walked closer to the Challenger, placed my hand on its cool, slightly dusty hood. The metal was still smooth under my palm, a familiar comfort. "I still drive it sometimes," I lied. The truth was, I hadn't started it in 6 months. The battery was probably dead, but I could drive it if I wanted to. Sarah scoffed. Not loudly, just a small dismissive sound. It stung more than any shout. "We already called a place," Mark said, pressing on. "They'll take it off your hands, get you a few $100 for scrap. It's better than nothing, right?" A few $100. For my Eleanor's car, for my youth, for my freedom. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I felt small, invisible. But beneath the hurt, a tiny spark ignited. A dangerous, cold spark. They thought they saw a frail old man, a senile fool clinging to rust. They had no idea. "A few hundred," I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. "Is that all it's worth to you?" "Dad, be practical," Sarah interjected. "It's a hunk of metal. It's a fire hazard. Think of the insurance liability." "I spoke with someone named Bob," Mark continued, ignoring me. "He's coming tomorrow morning, first thing. He specializes in old vehicles. He said he'd give us a fair price for whatever parts he can salvage." Tomorrow morning. They had already arranged it. Without asking, without discussing, they had decided. For me. The humiliation washed over me like a cold wave. They didn't even pretend to care about my feelings, my wishes. I was just an object, like the car, to be managed, to be disposed of. My gaze drifted from the Challenger to their house, Mark and Sarah's house, the big modern place they'd bought 5 years ago, just a few blocks from mine. They were so proud of it, their dream home. A subtle smirk played on Mark's lips. It's for your own good, Dad. Less clutter, less to worry about, less to worry about for me. Or less for them to worry about when they eventually emptied this house, sold it, took everything. The spark inside me grew hotter, colder. A quiet determination set in. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. If that's what you think is best. Mark brightened. Sarah smiled, a relieved, triumphant smile. They thought they had won. They thought I had given in. Good man, Dad, Mark said, patting my shoulder again. See, this is progress. Now, about that old radio in the living room. My blood ran cold. The radio, my grandfather's radio. They were already moving on to the next piece of clutter, to the next piece of my life to discard. I turned away from them, walking towards my front door. My back was straight, my shoulders squared. The old man they saw was gone, replaced by something else, something they hadn't anticipated. I'll be inside, I said, not looking back. Have a good evening. As I stepped into the quiet coolness of my house, I heard their muffled laughter from the driveway, discussing my progress, my compliance. They thought they were taking my past, my memories. They had no idea what I was about to take from them. No idea at all. I walked through the familiar hallway, past the photos of Eleanor and me, past the grandfather clock ticking softly. I reached my study, the small orderly room where I kept my papers, my secrets. I closed the door, locked it. Then I walked to my old mahogany desk, pulled open the bottom left drawer, the one that was always locked. My fingers brushed against a stack of old documents and a single, heavy, official-looking envelope, the one they didn't know existed. The dust motes danced in the fading light of the garage. They swirled around the shape of my old car, a silent witness to the storm brewing inside me. My son, Robert, and his wife, Sarah, had made their intentions clear. They saw it as nothing more than a rusted relic, an impediment to their grand plans. It's just taking up space, Dad, Robert had insisted, his voice impatient, like he was talking to a child. We need to clear out the garage. It's an eyesore, a fire hazard even. A fire hazard. My heart ached at the casual dismissal. This car, this machine that held so many memories, reduced to a potential danger. It was an extension of how they saw me, I realized. An old worn-out thing, past its usefulness, just waiting to cause trouble. Sarah had chimed in. Think of all the extra storage space, Grandpa. We could put in shelving, maybe a new workbench for Robert's tools. Her tone was sweet, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. Their dream garage, at the expense of my history. They didn't understand. They couldn't. This wasn't just metal and tires. This was the car I'd bought with my first big bonus. The car where I'd first kissed my late wife Eleanor. The car that had carried our children home from the hospital. Every scratch, every dent, a chapter in a life well lived. I tried to explain, to convey the weight of its meaning. It's not just a car, I'd started, my voice trembling slightly. It holds sentimental value. Robert had scoffed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the quiet. Sentimental value doesn't pay for the roof over your head, Dad, or ours, for that matter. That line, it hung in the air, a thinly veiled threat. The house, my house, the one they were so eager to help me manage, to downsize me from. Their words were poison, slowly seeping into my every thought. The next few days were a blur of subtle aggressions. Sarah started leaving brochures for senior living communities on the kitchen counter. Robert would casually mention the rising cost of property taxes, always with a significant glance at me. They discussed estate planning during dinner, as if I were already gone. I watched them, these two people I had loved, nurtured, sacrificed for. Their eyes held a cold calculation, their smiles thin and forced. They were circling, vultures around a carcass, just waiting for me to give up. But I wasn't dead yet, not by a long shot. I spent hours in the garage, just sitting in the driver's seat of my old beauty. The scent of aged leather and gasoline was a balm to my soul. I ran my hand over the dashboard, remembering Eleanor's small, elegant fingers doing the same. We had dreamed of restoring it together after I retired, a project for our golden years. She would have been furious. Eleanor, with her sharp wit and even sharper sense of justice, would have seen right through their schemes. She would have reminded me of the promise we made, never to let anyone take advantage of us or each other. I remembered the summer of '78. Robert was just a boy, always tinkering. He'd sit in the car with me, pretending to drive. "When I'm big, Daddy, I'll drive this car all over the world," he'd declared, his eyes wide with childish wonder. Now he wanted to scrap it. The pain was a dull ache that never quite went away. But beneath the pain, something else began to stir. A flicker of resolve, a memory of a conversation, a quiet evening with Eleanor, discussing what ifs. We had always been prepared. We had always planned for every eventuality. One afternoon, a tow truck appeared in my driveway, unannounced. Robert and Sarah were there, looking triumphant. "We found a buyer, Dad. He's going to take it away this afternoon. You won't have to worry about it any more." Robert beamed, as if he'd just won the lottery. My breath hitched. They hadn't even asked. They were just doing it. The ultimate disrespect. My property, my choice, completely disregarded. "Wait," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through their cheerful chatter. "You can't." Robert frowned, his smile faltering. "Dad, we talked about this. It's for the best." "No," I repeated, a little louder this time. A new strength surged through me, born of righteous anger and a deep-seated desire to protect what was mine. "You can't touch my car." Sarah stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "Grandpa, don't be difficult. It's just an old car. It's time to let it go." "It's not just an old car," I said, my voice rising, clear and firm. "And it's not yours to let go." The tow truck driver, a young man with a weary face, looked uncomfortable. He probably just wanted to hook up the vehicle and leave. Robert sighed dramatically. "Look, Dad, we're doing this for you. We're trying to simplify your life." I stared at them, truly seeing them for the first time in a long while. Their impatience, their thinly veiled greed, their utter disregard for my feelings. The car was just the beginning. They wanted to simplify my life right out of existence, or at least out of anything I cherished. My eyes swept over the faded paint, the small dent on the passenger door, the chrome that, despite the dust, still hinted at a glorious past. This car wasn't just a symbol of my life, it was a testament to my spirit. And they were about to learn that some things, some people, could not be so easily discarded. "You really want to get rid of my junk car this afternoon, do you?" I asked, my voice calm again, almost dangerously so. A quiet determination settled over me. The time for sorrow was over. The time for action had begun. Robert nodded, his confidence returning. "Yes, Dad. Today." "Very well," I said, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. "Then I suppose it's time for me to show you what else this afternoon holds." I turned, my gaze meeting theirs, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in their eyes. They had mistaken my quiet nature for weakness. They had no idea of the power I still held. the secret that lay dormant, waiting for this very moment. The game had begun, and they had just made their move. Now it was my turn. The days blurred into a silent siege. Mark and Sarah grew bolder. Their whispers turned into open declarations. Dad, we really need to get rid of that heap, Mark said one morning, over burnt toast. He didn't even look at me. It's just taking up space, Sarah added, flipping through a magazine about garden renovations. Imagine a lovely little seating area there instead. My old car, my dusty friend, wasn't just taking up space, it was taking up their space. The space they envisioned for their perfect life. A life without my presence, without my old things. They started making calls. I could hear them from my room. Words like scrap value and junk removal. Each word was a tiny chip off my dignity. Each word a hammer blow against my memories. One afternoon, a man showed up. He wore dirty overalls and had grease under his fingernails. He was a buyer, Mark explained, beaming. He's going to give us a good price for the old relic, Mark announced, as if I were deaf. The man walked around my car. He kicked the tires. He opened the hood, grunted, then slammed it shut. He didn't see history. He saw metal weight. He saw rust. $50, he grunted. If I have to tow it. Mark and Sarah exchanged glances. Disappointment? They expected more, even from a relic. Make it 75 and it's yours, Mark tried. The man just shook his head, already turning to leave. 50, take it or leave it. They haggled for a few more minutes, like I wasn't even there, like the car wasn't mine, like it was just another chore on their endless list of things to manage for the old man. I stood in the doorway, watching. My heart ached, but it wasn't just sadness. There was a new feeling bubbling up. A cold, quiet anger, a decision hardening inside me. $50 for a lifetime of memories, for the very thing that connected me to, well, to everything. They eventually settled on 60 for my junk car. For $60, they were ready to erase a part of me. He'll be back next Tuesday morning, Sarah said, triumph in her voice. First thing, so you'll need to clear anything out of it before then, Dad. Clear anything out of it? They meant my old fishing hat, the worn-out blanket from a camping trip, the faint scent of my wife's perfume that still lingered in the upholstery. They meant my memories. Tuesday morning. That was the deadline. Their deadline, not mine. I spent the next few days in a strange calm. My outwardly placid demeanor hid a flurry of activity in my mind. I watched them. I observed their routines, their little habits. They were so sure, so utterly convinced that they held all the cards, that they were in charge. I went to my workshop, a place they rarely visited. It was cluttered with my projects, my tools, my quiet life. They called it another mess. I pulled open an old metal filing cabinet. It was rusted at the edges, jammed with ancient receipts and faded photographs. Mark and Sarah would scoff at its contents. They wouldn't bother to look twice. Deep within, under a stack of old tax documents and a blueprint for a shed I never built, was a small locked wooden box. I ran my fingers over its smooth, polished surface. It was a gift from my late wife, Clara. She had given it to me the day we finalized the paperwork. The important paperwork. The key hung on a chain around my neck, tucked beneath my shirt. It had been there for decades, a constant, comforting weight, a secret guardian. I opened the box. Inside, there wasn't just one car title. There were several layers of history, and one very specific, very important document. It wasn't just a car title for my dusty old classic. No, it was more, much more. I took out the document. My fingers traced the words, the official seals, the names, their names. A small smile touched my lips. A dangerous smile, I imagine. One they had never seen. They had no idea what they were signing up for when they pushed for that $60 deal. I remembered the lawyer's face that day. Old Mr. Henderson. He had looked at me with respect, then a hint of admiration. "A shrewd move, Arthur," he'd said. "A very shrewd move indeed. Most wouldn't think of such a thing." Clara had squeezed my hand. We were young then, full of dreams, full of foresight. It turned out. I carefully folded the document and placed it back in the wooden box. Then I locked the box and put it back in its hidden spot in the filing cabinet. No one would ever suspect. They were so busy planning their new patio, so busy calculating the space they would gain. They even talked about having a big party to celebrate. A party in my backyard, with my car gone. "It will be such a relief," Sarah chirped one evening while I was trying to read the newspaper. "No more eyesore, just clean, open space." I looked over the top of my reading glasses. "Indeed," I said, my voice softer than usual. "Open space. You'll have plenty of open space." They didn't catch the nuance. They never did. They just heard what they wanted to hear. Tuesday morning loomed. The sky was clear. A perfect day for a transaction. A perfect day for a reckoning. I made myself a simple breakfast. Oatmeal. Strong coffee. I wanted my mind clear, my focus sharp. I saw Mark pacing by the window. Sarah was already outside, tidying up the garden, making sure everything looked pristine for the arrival of the tow truck. As if a new patio would magically appear the moment my car was gone. They were so eager, so expectant. The truck would be here soon. The moment of truth approached. I took a deep breath. My resolve was iron, my heart calm. They thought they were selling my junk car. They had no idea what they were truly buying, or rather, what they were selling. This Tuesday morning, they would get their clear space. And I would finally get my peace, and perhaps a little something more, much more. The distant rumble of a diesel engine reached my ears. They were here. The game was about to change, and they, dear children, had no idea they were even playing. The Saturday morning dawned cold and grey, just like the feeling in my chest. I watched from my kitchen window as Mark and Sarah moved about the driveway. They were making a show of it, a performance for the neighbors. "See, we're taking care of Dad's old junk." Their words, not mine. They had found a buyer, a scruffy man with a flatbed tow truck. He was due any minute. This was it, the final act of their betrayal, they thought, the final nail in the coffin of my dignity. I could hear their voices, muffled by the glass, but sharp with their usual condescension. "Just look at this rust," Sarah would say, holding a contemptuous hand to the fender. "He thinks it's some treasure." Mark would chuckle, a hollow sound. They didn't know. They couldn't know. The weight of that knowledge, a secret I had carried for decades, felt both heavy and exhilarating in my heart. All those years, observing them, their entitlement growing, their love for me shrinking. All for this moment. I poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady, my resolve solid. I had made calls, signed papers, set things in motion. The gears of justice, though slow, were now turning. The tow truck rumbled into view. It was an old, beat-up thing, much like what they considered my car to be. The buyer stepped out, a man with a tired face and a greasy cap. He walked straight to the Mustang, circling it, kicking the tires. He pulled out a clipboard, checking off items on a list. Mark and Sarah beamed. They were practically preening. "So, how much do you think for this antique?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with mock politeness. The man grunted. "About what we discussed. 400. For scrap, engine seized, body shot. $400 for my car. The car that had meant more to me than they could ever comprehend. The car that held a secret they were about to unravel. The car that was, unknowingly, their undoing. I walked out then, slowly, deliberately. The cold air hit my face, but I didn't shiver. I stopped beside the car, placing my hand on its cold, dusty hood. The metal was cool beneath my palm, familiar. "Dad, what are you doing out here?" Mark's voice was sharp. "Go back inside. It's cold." "We're just finishing up here," Sarah added, her smile tight. "Don't worry. We'll get rid of this old thing for you. Clear out some space." I turned to them. My gaze was steady. "You are not selling this car." They froze. Their smiles vanished. "Dad, we've been over this," Mark began, his jaw tightening. "It's a hazard. It's a junker. It's an eyesore." "It's a piece of sentimental value," Sarah cut in, her tone dismissive. "But frankly, it's taking up valuable space. And we need the money, Dad. You know how tight things are." "The money?" I repeated, my voice low. "You need the $400 this kind gentleman is offering?" I gestured to the buyer, who shifted uncomfortably, sensing the sudden tension. "It's a start," Mark said, puffing out his chest. "Towards your care, eventually." My care. The ultimate excuse for their greed. "This car," I said, my voice rising just a fraction, "is not for sale. Not for $400. Not for $4,000. Not for $40,000. They stared at me, dumbfounded. The buyer looked from me to them, then back again, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Dad, are you feeling all right?" Sarah asked, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched away. "I have never been clearer," I stated. "You see this car as a rusted hulk, a burden, a useless relic." "Because it is!" Mark finally exploded, throwing his hands up. "What are you talking about? Are you trying to mess this up for us? This is a done deal." "It is not a done deal," I countered, "because you do not have the right to sell it." "Of course we do," Sarah scoffed. "It's in your will. We're your power of attorney. We manage your affairs." "You manage my affairs," I conceded, "when I allow you to. But this car is different." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy between us. The buyer was now openly curious, his clipboard forgotten. "This car," I continued, "is not just my car. It is a symbol, a promise, a key." Their eyes narrowed. They exchanged a bewildered glance. "A key to what, Dad?" Mark asked, his voice laced with exasperation. "A key to your understanding," I said, a faint smile touching my lips, "and a key to the future of this house." I swept my hand, not towards my house, but towards their house, the one they had worked so hard to acquire from me, or so they thought. The house across the lawn, which they occupied, which they had slowly taken over. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. Their faces, a moment ago filled with frustration, were now pale, etched with confusion and a dawning dread. "What are you talking about?" Sarah stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Our house?" "Yes, your house," I affirmed. "The house you live in. The house you believe is fully yours, or soon will be, once you've truly cared for me to your satisfaction." The sarcasm in my voice was unmistakable. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief. "Dad, you're not making any sense. What does your old car have to do with our house? We paid for that house." "Did you?" I challenged, my gaze unwavering. "Or did I? Do you remember the initial payment? The large sum that cleared the way for you to secure your mortgage? The gift I gave you from my personal assets?" They shifted uncomfortably. They remembered. They had taken it readily enough. A substantial amount. Enough to make their dream home a reality. "That gift," I explained, my voice calm, was not a simple handout. It came with conditions, conditions that are directly tied to this very car. I watched them, their minds racing, trying to connect the dots. The buyer, now a forgotten spectator, was simply staring, captivated by the unfolding drama. The title of this junk car, I continued, my voice gaining a quiet power, is linked not just to the car itself, but to a very specific agreement. An agreement that stipulates that should this car ever be disposed of, without my express, written, and freely given consent, then the initial gift I provided for your house becomes a debt that must be repaid immediately, and failing that, the house itself would revert to the possession of the original benefactor, me. I paused, letting the full weight of my words settle upon them. Their eyes were wide with shock, then swiftly, with dawning terror. You see, I concluded, a hint of steel in my voice, this junk car isn't just a vehicle, it's the linchpin, it's the collateral, and its title, this classic car title, holds a power you never imagined, a power over your house, the house you thought was so securely yours. Mark stumbled backward, bumping into the tow truck. Sarah clutched her chest, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. The buyer, sensing a drama far beyond his pay grade, slowly backed away towards his truck. You can't be serious, Mark finally managed, his voice hoarse with disbelief. That's insane. That's illegal. It is perfectly legal, I corrected him calmly, drawn up by a very reputable lawyer, signed and sealed. A mutual agreement to protect my interests should my children ever forget their filial duties. My eyes bore into theirs, which, it appears, you both spectacularly have. They stared at me, then at the car, then at their house, then back at me, as if seeing me for the first time, not as the old disposable father, but as the architect of their sudden, impending doom. So, I said, my gaze sweeping over the scene, are you still interested in selling my junk car for $400? The buyer, now scrambling into his truck, started the engine. He didn't even look at them, just reversed swiftly down the driveway. He wanted no part of this family feud. Mark and Sarah stood there, motionless, like statues carved from ice. The cold wind whipped around us, but they felt no chill. Only the icy grip of fear. Their perfect plan, their easy disposal of me and my property, had just backfired spectacularly. The silent question hung in the air. What would I do next? And what would become of their house? The one they had tried to build on the foundation of my neglect. The rumble of the tow truck's engine was a funeral drum. It vibrated through the ground, up my porch steps, and right into my bones. Mark stood by my beat-up Comet, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. Sarah, beside him, was already counting her imaginary winnings. They barely glanced at me as I emerged from the house, a heavy, leather-bound folder clutched in my hand. "Dad, what are you doing out here?" Mark asked, waving a dismissive hand. "Go inside. We've got this handled." "The men are here," Sarah chimed in, her voice too bright. "It'll all be over soon. You won't have to look at that old heap anymore." I ignored their words. My eyes were fixed on the tow truck driver, then on the man standing next to him, clipboard in hand. The buyer. He looked eager, probably anticipating an easy flip. He had no idea. "Before you hook her up," I said, my voice cutting through the crisp autumn air, steadier than I felt. "There's a small matter we need to discuss." Mark scoffed. "Discuss what, Dad? The price is set. The deal is done. You agreed." "Aish agreed to let you try to sell her," I corrected, taking a slow step forward. "I never agreed to the final transaction." Sarah rolled her eyes. "It's just an old car, Dad, a rust bucket. We are doing you a favor." This rust bucket, I said, patting the Comet's faded fender, is more than it appears. I turned to the buyer. Sir, before you waste your time, I must inform you that the title you've been shown is not the full story. The buyer frowned, looking from me to Mark and Sarah. What's he talking about? Mark bristled. He's old, sir, confused. He signed the consent form for us to sell it. I signed a form giving you permission to list it, I clarified, pulling out a folded document from my folder. It wasn't the car's current registration. It was something far older, far more significant. The true ownership is a little more complicated. I held up an aged, slightly brittle piece of paper. It wasn't just a car title. It was an original bill of sale from decades ago, intricately linked to another, even more crucial document. This car, I began, my voice clear and deliberate, was more than just my first big purchase. It was a condition, a safeguard. Mark's face began to lose its smugness. Sarah's forced smile faltered. They sensed a shift, a wrong note in their symphony of greed. When your mother and I decided to help you, Mark, and you, Sarah, get your first homes, I continued, addressing them directly now. We wanted to ensure you understood the value of responsibility, of trust, of family. Their eyes darted nervously. They knew what I was talking about. The significant down payments, the low-interest loans, the outright gifts that made their first big steps possible. For your house, Mark, I said, my gaze piercing him. The one you've lived in for 30 years. The one you plan to remodel and flip after I'm gone. His jaw tightened. He knew I knew. The original deed to that house, I stated, pulling another document from the folder, a copy of an old land deed, has a very specific clause attached to it. A reversionary interest. The word hung in the air, heavy and foreign. The buyer looked confused. The tow truck driver looked bored. But Mark and Sarah, they looked terrified. A reversionary interest, I explained calmly, as if delivering a lecture, means that the full unencumbered title to your property, Mark, reverts to me or my estate, should certain conditions be met, or, in this case, not met. I paused, letting the silence build. Mark's face was ashen. Sarah's eyes were wide with dawning horror. One of those conditions, I continued, my voice dropping slightly, was the continued undisputed ownership of this car, my Comet. Its original title, the one in my hand, was explicitly referenced in your deed as the key. I watched their faces crumble. Mark sputtered, That's impossible. We own our house outright." "Do you?" I challenged, holding up the old deed copy. "Perhaps you never read the fine print. Perhaps your lawyer, seeing a father gifting his son a home, assumed good faith and overlooked what seemed like an eccentric old man's sentimental quirk. But it's there, plain as day. If the ownership of my Comet is transferred without my direct, explicit, and notarized consent, an agreement I never gave for this sale, then the full title to your house, Mark, is automatically transferred back to me." The buyer dropped his clipboard. The tow truck driver stared. Sarah gasped, clutching her brother's arm. "What are you talking about, Dad? Our house? What about our house?" "Oh, Sarah," I sighed, a profound sadness in my voice. "Yours was slightly different, more about shared responsibility. Your equity in your home was tied to the well-being and maintenance of my property, specifically this car. Your portion of the loan, paid by me as a gift, becomes immediately callable, with interest, if my specified property is negligently treated or disposed of without my permission." I pulled out a third document, a detailed legal letter from my lawyer, drafted and signed, summarizing the clauses and their implications. It wasn't just my word, it was official. So you see, I said, turning back to the dumbfounded buyer and the tow truck driver. This isn't just a junk car, it's the linchpin. If you take this vehicle, sir, under these circumstances, you would be facilitating the breach of a legal agreement that could cost my son his entire home and my daughter a very significant debt. The buyer looked from the documents in my hand to the pale, trembling faces of Mark and Sarah. He shook his head slowly. I'm sorry, folks. This is way above my pay grade. I can't touch this. Not without a clean, undisputed title. He turned to the tow truck driver. Let's go. This deal's off. The tow truck driver, looking slightly amused, nodded and climbed back into his rig. The engine roared, not in a funeral dirge this time, but in a retreating growl. The buyer, after giving Mark and Sarah one last pitying glance, hurried away. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Mark and Sarah stood frozen, their dreams of quick cash and future renovations shattered into a million pieces. Their faces were a canvas of disbelief, fear, and a dawning, terrible understanding. You can't do this, Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. You can't take my house. I don't want your house, Mark, I said, my voice heavy with a grief that felt older than time itself. I wanted your respect. I wanted your understanding. I wanted to be seen, not as a burden, but as your father. Sarah started to cry, silent tears tracking paths down her dirty cheeks. All those years, you never said anything. And all those years, I counted softly, you never bothered to ask what was important to me. You never saw past the junk. You never saw me. I looked at the comet, then back at my children. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy. The car was safe. Their homes were, for now, safe. But the family was broken in a way a legal document could never fix. Nai, I said, my voice tired but firm. What do we do? They had no answer, just the shattered remains of their plans and the chilling realization that their father, the one they dismissed, the one they tried to use, held the key not just to his old car, but to their very foundations. The question of what would happen next, what compromises, what apologies, what future lay before us, hung unspoken in the air. The silence stretched, filled only with the faint echo of a departing tow truck and the sound of my own aching heart.